Welcome to the Lend Academy podcast, episode number 247. This is your host, Peter Renton, founder of Lend Academy and co-founder of the Lend It Fintech Conference. Today's episode is sponsored by Lend It Fintech Digital, the new online community for financial services innovators. Today's challenges are extraordinary, with the upheaval affecting all areas of finance. More than ever before, we need to come together as an industry to learn from each other and make sense of this new world. Join Lend It Fintech Digital to connect and learn all year long from your peers and from the fintech experts. Sign up today at digital.lendit.com. Today on the show, I am delighted to welcome Jill Castilla. She is the CEO, President, and Vice Chairman of Citizens Bank of Edmond, based in Edmond, Oklahoma. They are a community bank. Jill is not your typical community bank CEO, though. She's an award-winning CEO. She's been named Community Banker of the Year by American Banker. She was on their Women to Watch list just last year. She's also been awarded Most Innovative CEO in Banking. And she has really been at the helm of this bank now for 11 years and taken it from a distressed bank right through now to really an example of what a successful community bank looks like. She's very engaged in fintech. She's spoken at Lend It before. She's spoken in many events, and she really has a fascinating story. We get into that in some depth. We talk about the PPP program and how they're able to react so quickly to that. We talk about this partnership she did with Mark Cuban, which was super interesting, and we go into some depth about that. We talk about how she views digital banks and what's next for Citizens Bank. It was a fascinating interview. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, Jill.
Hi, great to be here.
Okay, so I like to get these things started by giving the listeners a little bit of background. You have a pretty high profile in the fintech space or in the banking space, but why don't you tell the listeners what you've done in your career, particularly before you got to Citizens Bank?
Oh, well, I grew up in Oklahoma. I enlisted in the Army after my sophomore year in college. I didn't have a way to pay for school, and my family wasn't really supportive of going to college. So the Army was my gateway to being able to fulfill that dream. So I enlisted and served as an engineer in the Army, and then in the Oklahoma Army National Guard after that. I ended up getting my undergraduate degree from Hawaii Pacific University while we were stationed in Hawaii. Love, that's a nice place.
That is a nice place to go to school.
When we came back to Oklahoma, I got my dream job to work at the Federal Reserve Bank. My undergraduate degree was in finance. And so I got to work at the Fed for 10 years in their management development program and managed everything from cash to HR, public affairs, financial management, and ultimately ended up managing the Check 21 infrastructure for the Federal Reserve System and all the check processing sites at that time. There were over 20. It's much more consolidated now. I think there's just one. But managed those consolidations and was second level to support from an IT standpoint. So I kind of cut my teeth from a fintech kind of payment standpoint at the Federal Reserve. And then the Fed paid for me to get my master's in economics. They also sent me to a graduate school of banking at the University of Wisconsin. And there, the reason I went to college in the first place was that the local community banker in town, I would carry groceries for her in high school. When that really encouraged me to go to college, she would give me money to take the ACT. So I really revered her as not just a leader in our community, but someone who shaped my life and kind of kicked me to do more. And when I was in banking school, I just fell in love with not only the concept of banking, but the responsibility of a community banker and what they mean to the citizens in their community. So when my classmates recruited me up to his bank in northern Minnesota to be in the CFO type of role, so I was there for 2 years. And during this time, my mother married into the family that owns Citizens Bank of Edmond, or part of Citizens, and the bank got into trouble. And my stepfather called and asked if I would be willing to come down and help turn around the bank. So in the meantime, I got married, had 3 children.
Okay.
And that's kind of the story of Jill.
Okay, so then you come to back to Edmond, and what was the state of play? Because was this during the financial crisis that this all happened?
Yes, it was 2009, July 1st, 2009 is when I came back. I thought they had just had a Federal Reserve examination, and the financial crisis really didn't hit Oklahoma like it did the rest of the nation. We ended up being the only troubled bank in the Oklahoma City metropolitan area. So walked in, I thought I was coming into a bit of a turnaround. What I found was rampant fraud.
Wow.
We really had done everything to ourselves. It wasn't an economic condition that caused the bank to be troubled. We were not conducting inspections for draws. So we would have $1 million fully drawn out on a construction loan for a house. And then you drive by where the house is supposed to be, and it's just a lot, like an empty piece of dirt. And we ended up having $12 million in loan losses that first year. And for a bank that's at that time was $350 million, which is $30 million in capital, losing over a third of your capital in a 12-month period. And really our bank, our largest shareholders, our employee stock ownership program, so there wasn't capital accessibility. We're also a sub-S bank, so our stockholders pay our taxes, so we couldn't distribute out to cover that. It was a time where the bank was searching for its identity, was trying to fight to recover. I had come back to the bank. I had taken a 50% cut in pay from where I was. The management didn't want me here. I didn't really realize that till I came. And so I didn't have responsiveness. No one would give me correct information. The fraud resulted, we had over $2 million of expense abuse within the first 6 months of that 2009. We were paying for weddings and medical school for kids and, all kinds of crazy things. And, I just uncovered that. It resulted in the turnover of our whole senior management team. And so I really kind of took the helm of the bank without having the positional authority to be in that role. And we ended up orchestrating the fastest turnaround in the nation without adding capital. So it took about 18 months for us to get things the ship righted. And we did that by shrinking, and we couldn't add capital. So we focused on the asset size of the bank, went from $350 million to $250 million, and maintained our capital ratios the whole time. So we were never not well capitalized. And then, ran off high interest rate depositors and started really seeing what sustained this bank for the 100-year period up to that point that the bank had been in existence. What had sustained it was the social capital that the bank had built for a century. And so the depositors would come to us, and they weren't demanding their money back. They were demanding to know whether the bank was going to survive because of how important Citizens Bank was to Edmond. And the bank started in 1901 before statehood. The next oldest bank came in 1976. So for 3/4 of a century, we were the community bank of our town of 100,000.
Wow. So you were a real important part of that community then. So maybe you could I'd be curious about how you got through that difficult period, because obviously I imagine it wasn't always a done deal. It wasn't obvious that you were going to succeed, I imagine. So how did you take the bank through such a difficult period as a newcomer, really?
Yeah, I knew the employee stock ownership program, our bank owns more than a third of our bank. And so if this bank failed, it was going to be detrimental to the people that were working here. And also I knew what a gap it would be to our community. So my motto during that time was that failure was not an option. I would not allow it to be discussed, and I would fight until the end to manage every single ratio I possibly could, and just being obsessive with doing only the right thing, being above reproach in everything that we did and not tolerating anything beyond that. And it was a time where I was a very authoritative leader. It's not my natural state, but I had a situation where I didn't really trust the people I worked with to make good decisions because they were consistently either providing me false information and I didn't have the authority to be able to remove them. And so as a result, it had to be this super controlled, really all the decisions going through one individual time period, which is, again, it's not sustainable. It's terrible for our culture, but at that time was really the necessary thing that had to happen. And so we went from being where failure is not an option, not an innovative way of managing a company at all, to now trying to facilitate that failure is an option, that we want to be able to fail small and where it doesn't impact the customer, But in that period of time, it was demanding perfection. So again, not a sustainable model and not the type of leader that I want to be known to be. But it was a necessary thing to get done in order to save this bank.
Right. So then, okay, so you've fast forward, 11 years or thereabouts. How do you describe your bank today? Maybe give us a sense of the size and what your customer base is like, and what type of loans you hold on your books, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so back then we had 125 employees, 6 locations, and we're 350 million in asset size. And like I mentioned, we shrank. We ended up selling all our branch locations in 2013, consolidating to one location in downtown Edmond, which is a low moderate income tract in the middle of an affluent city, with a lot of empty storefronts whenever we made that decision. So now we're down to 1, and we've gone from 125 employees to 55, all through attrition. We didn't do any layoffs during that period of time. We just tried to move, as we had turnover, move people to different roles and develop a team that was really strong. Right now, our asset size is 320 million. That's what it was this morning. But we also have about 25 million of paycheck protection loans that are part of that asset size that we have been using the PPP lending facility. So our real asset size from a capital ratio standpoint is around 295-ish. And we're looking at staying pretty small. So the way that the bank, really the competitive advantage for this bank, is that our funding source are just thousands, tens of thousands of non-interest-bearing deposits, checking accounts for small businesses and individuals who basically have pulled their money together like they did 119 years ago, and they're still doing it today. And that's what our deposit base continues to grow in that non-interest-bearing category. So on the deposit side, we look very similar to maybe what a credit union would look like. Lots of small accounts. On the lending side, we're more of a traditional community bank where it's a mixture of just about every type of loan that you can imagine, from small business loans, SBA loans, consumer loans, mortgages, larger size commercial real estate loans. But we have a staff that's well-rounded and that really can handle any kind of request from a borrower in our community. And we also have secondary market loans. So it's kind of a real traditional community bank. We don't have any kind of niche. It's actually quite the opposite. We just try to be a good community partner for everyone. We're Citizens Bank of Edmond. We want to reflect the citizens of our community.
Right. Okay. So I want to talk a bit about the PPP, and I'm on Twitter a lot, and I noticed you were very active on Twitter around the PPP. And I saw you give out your cell phone number several times, I think, on Twitter to try and obviously help your small business customers. So maybe just talk a little bit about what the people or your customers maybe were asking you and how you reacted to the PPP, because obviously this was put together, we all know, very, very quickly, and it wasn't easy. I mean, many big banks struggled mightily to get their act together. So how were you able to respond so quickly to it?
Well, so from a communication standpoint, we're committed to being transparent and accessible. And that's been, especially in times of crisis, you have to do that on steroids. So I always provide my cell phone number out to the public so that they can text me anytime. But we knew that we were feeling the anxiety, just the heaviness of the anxiety and fear that was occurring at the time that the PPP was being developed. Even we were really engaged in the development of the CARES Act. And that communication had nothing to do with marketing or PR. It was only to try to be some conduit of information, two-way communication with our community, and what ended up being more of the smallest business community around the nation, to just provide information, to know that they know that someone's listening and that will relay their concerns as we have a voice with those that are impacting the development or the execution of these programs. So that was part of it. And then it turned into, once we were able to get the program was being more defined, we became very aware early on, before PPP launched that we were going to have access issues, and then we thought other banks would have the same access issue. We are an SBA lender, but if you don't enter anything into E-Tran for 30 days, your authorization is turned off. And so when we tested a week before PPP deployed, we ran into that issue. So we started sounding the alarm bells, and you can do that through formal means, but in a time of crisis, there's not been a better source of getting the right people to hear your message than social media. There just absolutely is not. It gives you the accessibility to the highest levels of agencies, delegations, associations that maybe not that you're a member of, but they're aligned from a values standpoint. And so we started using our voice for that as well. We were committed just as much internally that when we launched the PPP program, that we were going to provide status updates to our customers, on those applicants, on a regular basis, so that they knew where they were in the queue. There was so much anxiety. It's hard to put yourself even in that place of the need of these small business customers to get some type of funding or assurance of funding, and knowing that there was basically this pot of gold, or I thought it was more similar to like the Hunger Games when they come out of the ground, utopia there. And you knew like there were some people that were already equipped with their applications were ready to go because they had great relationships with the SBA or someone else that was assisting them that could get, an advantage of getting to that pot of gold. And so we knew how important it was to be able to communicate, to alleviate fears, and then to also talk directly as we could to the SBA and to the Treasury to let them know that this need is there and that we need to make sure that the accessibility is there for our small businesses too. The PPP went live on Friday morning. We didn't get guidelines until the night before. We didn't get access until late Saturday night. And our first file that I saw saved was at 3 o'clock in the morning that Sunday morning. And like I said, we only have 55 team members, which some of the fintechs have said, well, that's a lot of people. I only have 11. Well, these 55 team members are also the teller staff, the new staff. This is not like a team that is focused exclusively on this particular situation. And so we were really trying to mobilize. We only had one access point that was working. And so we were just trying to drive, all the applications through that point. It was excruciating. It took forever. In that first phase, we were able to get through quite a few applications, but knew that there was such a gap, and especially in those gig workers, independent contractors, that couldn't apply until that following Friday after when phase one started. And so we knew that there was even more work to do. We're really fortunate at the very beginning. Tesla, our software, I had put out a call knowing that we want to stay engaged with customers. So I did a call on social media just asking for fintech partnership opportunities for PPP. Tesla came back and offered a free tool for community banks to be able to manage applications through the process and also communication with customers. It was perfect for us. They provide to other community banks free as well. That was great. And then from that point, we were able to get a partnership with MX, who then helped us get where if we only had one access point, we could drive all of our applications through that access point through those applications going. But again, using social media to communicate the status of where we were with customers. And we saw a lot of anxiety from small business customers not thinking that they were qualified or that they were sophisticated enough to be able to apply. So our team spent hours and even days with some business owners trying to make sure that their applications were complete so that they could get this much needed funding. So the communication was mainly for those that had the least amount of resources available to them to know that the program was accessible to them.
Right.
And then at the same time, I was working to try to match make small businesses that maybe be in New York or Florida or California, with Texas, with the community banks in those areas that could serve them well, because we were having to, based upon our limited resources, limit it to just Oklahoma applicants.
Right. And so did you focus, obviously your existing small business customers, I imagine would have been your primary focus, but did you help many small businesses that were not Citizens Bank customers?
Yeah, so the first round, we did prioritize our customers, and we actually triaged. We were trying to help those that were in the most critical need first. And sometimes those were borrowers and sometimes they were not. And then we really focused more on our customer base, only because that's only what we could handle from a volume standpoint. Phase two, we opened that up to all of Oklahoma. And I'm not sure what I don't think I have percentages, but I would be a good wager to say that at least 50% of those that we served they weren't legacy customers of Citizens Bank of Edmond.
Okay. Because I'm curious because with our story, which I've shared, is that we have banked with a top four bank since the founding of Lendit, and we weren't getting anywhere. And obviously, I know a lot of people in the fintech space and the small business space, but we ended up going with a small community bank here in Denver, which we're now moving to be our primary bank. And I'm just wondering, it seems like there's many community banks that have come out of this really in a positive light. And it sounds like, obviously your bank is one of them. So do you think that this has been like a real net positive for your bank and for community banks in general?
I think it shows that you want to have some type of local accountability. And I encourage anyone to bank somewhere where you know that you can go meet with a CEO or get them on the phone. And so if that's a big bank that their CEO is accessible to you, then that's great. But you want to be sure that you can talk to the person that's ultimately making the decision and is accountable for whether it's their direction in which their bank is going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. You certainly can't get that with a large bank. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Mark Cuban, who I was on Twitter when he put out a call for saying, "Hey, I want an innovative banker to come work with me to create a program for consumers." And I saw you actually responded really quickly, and then next thing I know, I'm reading about it in American Banker that you've got this program in place. So tell us a little bit about that process and what you created with Mark Cuban.
Yeah, so my phone started blowing up from friends that were following Mark Cuban and saw the post, and I had many of them that responded and tagged me on it, and then I had a lot of text messages from them as well, primarily from the fintech community, and then they started mobilizing other people in the fintech community. I responded, gave him my cell phone number, responded a couple of times, but I didn't hear anything, but another fintech friend sent me an email and said, "Hey, I have Mark's email address. He does publicize it, so you might try this," because he said he does monitor that account. So I emailed him, and he said that he would call me back. He wanted to call and talk about it. So then he did call me. It was in the middle of my board meeting, actually. And so we had about a 7-minute conversation, and it was really just like it was a Shark Tank pitch almost. I had my pitch, and then he destroyed that pitch, and then had his kind of what I really want to see happen response. And then I gave him some feedback about some concerns I had about it, but then some things I saw that were really good about his perspective on it. And it was mainly talking then about a line of credit. And he called back and about an hour or two later and just said, "Hey, I think I have another idea. Let's not mess with a loan. Let's look at an overdraft program. Because then you don't have to do as much, you don't have to do underwriting." I was concerned about the bank's exposure to an unsecured loan program, and basically float the funds until someone gets a stimulus check. I mean, it was an exposure of multi-million dollars in a bank that has $30 million of capital. So I was really concerned about our exposure, but wanted to provide, both of us had this focus on helping. And so the overdraft, it's talking to him, I could outline pretty quickly how I thought that we could accomplish something. And he agreed with some of the criteria, and then asked me to come up with a plan. And then I came up with a plan. And after huddling our staff, I grabbed the team both times and just said, "Okay, first of all, this is what I've done. Do we want to move forward with having discussions with Mark Cuban about this?" And it was a resounding yes. And then when he came back and we kind of formulated a plan, brought the team back together, and they're like, "This sounds great." I'm like, "Yeah, but this is exposing us to a significant financial risk. And then we have a significant regulatory risk from a compliance standpoint because overdrafts are such a sensitive area, and we want to make sure we're doing the right thing." And everybody was just a resounding yes. Some risks that we identified, we were able to mitigate. So I emailed Mark Cuban back and said, "Okay, he wanted me to send him what I was going to tweet out." And I said something like, "We'll be posting soon our new program on this." And he basically just gave me the cut sign and was like, "Yeah, that's pretty basic. And I can get that any bank to say something is coming soon. We need something now." And so I said, "Okay, well, how about if I can get it done by Tuesday?" And this email, I think, was on Saturday. And he's like, okay, that'll work. Tell me when you're going to send it out on Monday. And so we were able to hustle and get it done by Monday rather than by Tuesday. And he continues to be a leader and at least getting us to think differently about this crisis. There is we think we have this toolkit because we had the financial crisis and we took so much effort to make sure the financial crisis wouldn't happen again, and that the Fed had all the tools and Treasury had all the tools that they needed to address the financial crisis. And that crisis last time, was in that mid-market, and it was at the much larger banks, much larger companies that were affected by it. We still have this toolkit and we're deploying it now because we now have entered another crisis. But this crisis is so at the small business level, it is at Main Street that this is happening. It's store by store by store by store, the systemic spread of the economic impact. And it's not this massive attack at the top. And so he's done a great job of really trying to break away from convention and to identify that this toolbox isn't adequate. And he's got the ability to get to the highest level of government. And also the whole thing with this partnership with us wasn't about Citizens Bank of Edmond. Mark was wanting to use a bank that could plant a seed and then it spread. And that's exactly what happened. We ended up having over 400 interactions with different banks around the United States and ended up in national publications, on all kinds of chats on social media, and with large groups that we were able to then really get everyone to start thinking about, could we help from an overdraft standpoint? And that's where you saw lots of banks shift to not charging overdraft fees, applying more liberal overdraft management. And so that was really what his focus was kind of the same way that this crisis was occurring, where it was like one storefront at a time having a challenge, was making the change from kind of one bank at a time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so then what was the specific product? You said it was an overdraft product. Was it tied to the stimulus checks? So you put it in place, and obviously stimulus checks have been arriving. Are people paying you back like you expected?
Yeah, so it was a little bit different. So the criteria included that you had your stimulus money had your previous tax payment or tax refund had to come out of your Citizens account, and then, so we knew then the stimulus check was from the Citizens account, and so that was one of the criteria. And so all those funds have come in. We have seen our overdraft speed triple what they normally are, and we've been exceptionally liberal with how we've been processing overdraft payments, making sure that we're not keeping food off someone's table because we won't process a check. So we are maintaining higher overdraft balances, and again, trying to really help our community weather the storm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're almost out of time, but a couple of things I want to get to. There's obviously been a lot of talk about digital banks, and in fact, many of the digital banks have been adding customers by the thousands every day in this crisis. So I'd be curious to get your take. Do you see digital banks as really a competitor to you, as a complement? I mean, how do you view this kind of digital banking movement?
Yeah, I think digital banking is, in some ways a compliment, and in some ways it's competitive. I think that there's a rapid evolution of the community bank to where it can be both a digital bank as well as your traditional community bank on the corner. For us, you can open all your accounts online, and you can manage it through our mobile system, or we're about to upgrade our mobile banking, so then it has an open API, so we can plug in lots of things to make it sexier. So, I think what's happened with digital banking is it's really pushed conventional banking to be more and to be relevant. And so, I don't spend a lot of time concerned about other digital banks, but I do spend time being inspired by them. And so I do think they're elevating the game of all of banking. And, it's great to see the way that they've built some of their business models that allow you to be very thoughtful about fee income regarding your customers, to not be as dependent upon that, but to be able to have a sustainable revenue source or a business plan so that you can stay around for another 100 years, which is our goal.
Right. Okay. Last question then. We're in the middle of this, real what's going to be a financial crisis. I'm curious about, what do you see the next, 6 to 12 months holding for Citizens Bank?
Well, for us, we're planning for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. So we know that there's going to be some small businesses, especially, and some consumers in our community that this temporary crisis is going to have a longer term impact on them. So we're focusing a lot more on portfolio management. But then we're also looking at this crisis as ways how do we look at things we implemented in the short term as convenience offerings to our customer and be able to develop them into longer term solutions to increase the accessibility our customers have to their finances. And so for something like curbside banking, we were running things out to customers outside, trying to keep safe distances. Well, now we formalize that so that we have curbside banking that customers can now go online or use their mobile to schedule a time and to do non-cash related transactions at the curbside, and then be able to use restaurant style buzzers if there's a wait inside the bank to be able to go and take advantage of all the great fun in downtown Edmond and then come back to the bank whenever their point in time comes back. So it's really about how do you take these things that we kind of MacGyvered up during the crisis and perfect them and make them something that makes banking even better post-crisis than it was before.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to leave it there. It's fascinating. It's really been fascinating to watch you and your company sort of operate through what is a very challenging time for everybody. So, thank you for coming on the show today, Jill. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. See ya. One of the things I really appreciate about Jill and the Citizens Bank of Edmond's story is that she really shows what's great about community banking. Obviously, she talks about how she's close to the customers, but what I see most is how she's able to react quickly. I mean, she talked about the PPP story, how they're able to react to that, doing this program with Mark Cuban, doing the curbside banking. I mean, this is why I think Jill has become such a high-profile person in community banking, is that she's innovative, she's not scared to try new things, not scared to take a risk, and she implements these things quickly, and that has really a lot of the recipe for success there. And she's been able to continue to do it year after year. And I see one of the community banks really as coming into their own, I think, in this financial crisis. And I think what we'll find at the end of all this is that many of the community banks are going to come out of this crisis much stronger than when they went in. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Today's episode was sponsored by Lendit Fintech Digital, the new online community for financial services innovators. Today's challenges are extraordinary, with the upheaval affecting all areas of finance. More than ever before, we need to come together as an industry to learn from each other and make sense of this new world. Join Lendit Fintech Digital to connect and learn all year long from your peers and from the fintech experts. Sign up today at digital.lendit.com.